I was wondering, like, how did you find Buddhism in your life? Was Buddhism something that you grew up in close proximity to? And how did you find yourself at the San Francisco Zen Center?
Yes, so I come from a mixed culture household. So my mother is from Korea, and so she grew up with this sort of Korean Buddhism flavor, but it's not necessarily what we would think of in terms of Korean Sun. I think it was much more shamanistic. So that was her upbringing with Buddhism, but she still kind of had these values of karma that she taught to me when we were growing up. And they ended up becoming Pentecostal Christians when they immigrated to the US in San Francisco because of the Korean church is such a space for community and finding other Koreans who are in a similar position as you. So I grew up in this Pentecostal Christian background, actually. And so Buddhism was kind of always around, but it was also something very much that my family was like, don't go there because it's, not Christian like and kind of goes against the values that they had developed while living in the US. So the San Francisco Zen Center was actually just a few blocks away from where I went to high school. And during my time in high school, we would go to Spirit Rock late night. Like, I don't even know how. Like, we would get into someone's car and like end up over there and just be hanging out and, meditating together, talking about Dharma. But most of my friends had parents who were part of that whole SF Dharma Zen world. And so to me, it was so like, oh, like, what is this thing? I was so curious and like, such a staple also I feel like of San Francisco of that whole Zen scene that was going on. So I would always kind of like pass by it or we would be in proximity to the Zen Center. And then it wasn't until I started to seek support and recovery for substance abuse that I got into the Zen Center building. And that was based off a recommendation of someone who was supporting me and said like, hey, like, it seems like maybe these traditional AA or NA rooms, that sort of 12-step recovery space isn't really working for you. Why don't we try this one? And it completely changed everything for me. It was such a beautiful experience. And I am just so grateful for being connected to that space in that way.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you for sharing that. It's a I also grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the Bay Area just has just a very rich and diverse Buddhist population and just culture about it. So it's wonderful that in high school that you found yourself sneaking off to or just very much heading out to Spirit Rock and hanging out with friends and having that around you. And thank you for sharing your journey with recovery through the San Francisco Zen Center. And I was wondering, just with how it resonated with you, was there something about the framework of San Francisco Zen Center that kind of brought a little bit more of I guess provided like a safer container for you, or just like provided like a framework or a philosophy that kind of helped you heal in that way, or tend to things in that way, whereas like maybe Alcoholics Anonymous or other things like that had like just a maybe some other elements of it that made you feel like you couldn't quite settle in.
Yes, so for me, I felt like at the Zen Center, there was a solution that was being presented to us that we could already um, engage with and not necessarily have to still kind of like figure things out and detox and get to this certain state of mind. Where I felt like the Zen Center was like, here, just like you're going to take this medicine right now and see what happens. And so I love that they just jumped in with that. And so I always felt that even just in the space of meditation, I still remember it was the priest would say, like, just count to 10, like just count to 10 breaths and just you. going at it over and over again. And so that felt like it was simple enough and also gave me a like sort of purpose and a thing that I could um, clearly focus on and say this for the next, I think it was about, a 30-minute session. Um, like that's all I have to do. And I think even just starting off with not speaking and being in silence and really just creating this sense of stability and peace within yourself before the sharing would happen was also um, a lot more accessible to me and felt like I could really get into a deactivated state and calm down and also share that and create that energy with the sangha that was there.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you for your openness to share that. I'm so glad that there was this sense of a solution or sense of like an action as opposed to just more like processing. There was this kind of like, well, how do I be in this moment? Because what I need right now is to be in this moment. And so I'm really
Mm-hmm.
glad that there was a framework there for you that you felt like you could be held in for sure. And then and you were saying that this experience of being at the San Francisco Zen Center, the way that the recovery Dharma kind of program worked, it had like a life-changing effect on you. Is that where it kind of like your more committed interest in Buddhism started, like where your path kind of started a little bit more in a committed way?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yes. I think I started to develop some health problems related to this lifestyle that I was living. And so, I went through my different ups and downs throughout that recovery phase post SF Zen Center, but that, meditation always became this emergency medicine that I could take at any point where, if I could finally get out of this sort of crazy mind wandering that was going on in reactivity, I could then be like, oh my gosh, I remember this, meditate, just meditate, focus on the breath, count to 10, and do that. And so it really became a part of, I guess, my own pattern. Very slowly, it was like all integrating. So then when my practice became a bit more committed and serious, I think just having that direct experience with, wow, there was a solution here, really created this momentum to keep going and pursue maybe something that was, uh, yeah, greater than what I had started with.
Certainly. So the San Francisco Zen Center has a Zen lineage, and from what I've seen just in preparing for our conversation, what I see of your work now, there's some Son qualities to your practice, which I'd love to talk to you about as well. But there seems to be a very strong Theravadan, Burmese Theravadan manifestation or expression of your practice, as well as some other traditions that you have incorporated into your life. And I was wondering how you went from uh, going from your Zen experience into exploring more of that Theravadan
Mm-hmm.
approach.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, because there's just so many different flavors and lineages. It's so amazing. That's actually what I love about Buddhism so much, and how they just kind of build together and they're kind of modular and it's so fascinating and fun. So that jump from, I guess, like a Japanese Zen over to more to Korean Sun and Burmese Theravada had a lot to do with one of the teachers that I met when I arrived at Mahapajapati Monastery, where I'm at right now. I'm one of the QTs. I had just driven by it and had actually just started getting more interested into Korean Sun because I was like, oh, yeah, like this Japanese lineage of Zen and Korean Sun, like totally different. Um, and so I was more curious about getting back into my own family history and sort of like, okay, so where where is this Buddhism interest coming from? Maybe I should go down into the Korean direction and see what happens. And so I read this book by Daehaeng Sunim, who is a Korean uh, nun in Korean Sun lineage, and she really inspired me actually. And I feel like she was just kind of like this key to Mahapajapati Monastery because it was just such a crazy coincidence where I'm reading about Daehaeng Sunim, and she started her practice just in the war where she's separated from her family and she's living in caves and the mountain, and she's like 12 years old, I think. And and then a Korean monk found her, and he was like, oh my gosh, like what's going on here, and brought her back to the monastery. And then they just developed this relationship where he was training her and they were doing tons of nature practice and all of these other kind of ascetic trainings. And so I read that and felt really inspired by her and what she had done. And so when I drove by Mahapajapati Monastery, I was like, oh, what is this place? And then I just kind of knocked on the door, and then the abbess at the time was a Korean woman, and she was like, "Oh, I know everything about Daehaeng Sunim and Korean Sun," and that's she started with that lineage, and then later on ordained as a Theravada Bhikkhuni. So that's kind of how it all happened. Where then I was learning from the abbess at the time, and so she mixed in a lot of these elements of Korean Sun because in some ways, like when she explained, um, topics and teachings from that lineage, like that would really click. And then other times, like the Myanmar lineages would really click. And so she was kind of mixing these different teachings together to like really help me, like not also get stuck in one way of doing things.
Wow. It's such a fascinating uh, life path where you kind of you get guided in these certain ways. And here you are
Right.
being very moved by this book, and then you knock on the door of the monastery, and there's this connection and there's this familiarity with the very thing that
Mm.
had inspired you so much. Um, and something that just in reflections of that book that you mentioned and the story of this 12-year-old or very young person going off into the wilderness and like meditating in caves and being in there, um, it seemed like that really resonated with you, and that's actually something that's part of your practice or part of your journey. And is that where at that monastery is that where you started to kind of explore that wilderness and that approach towards practice in nature?
Yes, definitely. I think with Mahapajapati, there were just like on like 100 acres of Mojave Desert land, and and there was just so much to explore when I was out here the first time. So the first time at Mahapajapati was from 2021 to 2022, and so I was really lucky where I was like the only layperson there. I think so. I got a lot of attention from all the bhikkhunis there. And so they were just always like every single time they would see me walking outside, they always had like some tip to tell me. And it was one of the bhikkhunis from Sri Lanka who she came up to me and she was like, you got to take your shoes off. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. Okay, that's a thing. And she was like, do you even know why? I was like, I don't know, like, just to feel more connected. And she was like, because you need to know what feels good and what doesn't. And, and so that really just sent me off on a whole trip where I was just like, okay, I'm like doing all this like contemplation of feeling tones, like barefoot, and it'd be summer. And so I'd be like intentionally trying to step on like really sharp rocks or get near the ants that would start biting me. And then would then try to go to like the sandier spots, but that just kind of grew and grew and grew. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to scramble up on these rocks and kind of try to visit these mountain peaks that I'm seeing. So there was just so much spaciousness and freedom to be able to explore the wilderness, all the while thinking about Daehaeng Sunim. And like I just kept thinking about her and just about her different practice and how she was like always pushing it. Um, and and that kind of inspired me because she was also like forced into this situation. She was like really trying to figure out how to survive out there, and then just by pure like karma, like a a monk comes in and he's like, okay, like I'm gonna help you out. And so I was just kept thinking about that story a lot. And it's so different because it's like I'm not forced into this situation where I have to like go and be in the mountains and just trying to survive, being separated from my family and whatnot. And so I just like really, I don't know, that just kind of kept my curiosity and this sort of like passion going of just to keep exploring and see how close could I get to nature and and all of that, and just trying to figure out like, is nature looking at me, or am I looking at nature? And so I kept doing that. I remember my one of my the teacher, she would come up to me and she'd be like you're feeling, piti, you're feeling samadhi, you're feeling, these are kind of like the fruits of your practice of just how much you're just enjoying nature, and observing it and trying to observe yourself. And so I had a friend from crazy uh, meditation retreat going on in Arizona. And she was like, do you want to do it with me? And sometimes I joke around that it was a wellness check because I was just kind of like all the way out in the middle of nowhere doing like this desert monk stuff. And she was like, yeah, like you can meet some more people, and they're out in the wilderness meditating and all of that. So I was like, okay. And I went with her, and that was probably like the most transformative experience of my life, was that meditation retreat where we were out in the mountains of southern Arizona, and it was organized by a retreat center called Dharma Treasure, and we were out, I think, for like 10 days, just kind of in the mountains, yeah, in the high desert. And our guide would like backpack up like food, and we would have to try to find these different water sources. So and not sleeping in tents and things like that, and every day was just like work, where you're just going from one spot to the next and really having only the essentials. And so that really changed my whole mind, where I was like, okay, so this is like, I can actually do something like this, and there are other people who are doing it. I'm not like this weirdo out in the desert dreaming of this kind of life or way to practice meditation and Buddhism.
Wow. No, that's amazing. And oh, I'm so glad that you are open to the that adventure to something that would change the course of your life or have such an important impact. And like this isn't for anyone that, I mean, I haven't spent too much time in high desert in that kind of capacity, like even let alone hiking, but definitely not this sort of extended retreat, just the bare essentials kind of experience, because the high desert is a pretty rugged landscape. It's beautiful, and you have these beautiful trees and Joshua trees and things like that, and cacti and wildlife. But when you are in wilderness, I mean, there isn't, you can come across rattlesnakes, you can come across various other things. And if you're not working with tents, there's flash flooding, there's all kinds of things that you're kind of contending with. And it's really amazing that, it's wonderful that you found a group, a supportive group with guides and with some elements of safety around you, and to know that you're not just like that one person who's like, I'm gonna do this. There's like
Yeah.
you're held by other people that share that interest. And I was wondering too, when you venture out into those spaces to meditate in caves and to more or less kind of use them as shelter too. And when you're out in the wilderness, kind of that sense of working, you have to build a fire, you have to contend with the elements, contend with the sun, contend with jagged rocks and things like that. When you're doing that, that element of work and exertion, I feel like sometimes people might be distracted by that and say,
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable. And since I'm not comfortable, I can't be mindful. I can't be with anything because I'm in defense mode. I
Mhm.
gotta like climb this boulder, And that to me is a challenge as opposed to an opportunity. And it seems like from your experiences being in this rugged landscape that it was both. And I was just wondering
Mhm.
how you would offer through your experiences attending to those challenges, uh, how they felt and how they manifested as invitations to practice, how it felt like
Mhm.
to be attending to difficult elements that are out of your control, those wild moments, how you can turn your maybe defense instincts into something that is more open.
Mhm. Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question because that is so true. Like, how do you work with those moments where like you're like, oh, I should be mindful, but there's all these things that are activating your nervous system and like you can't help it, right? Because it's like, oh, there is this um, part of the brain that's designed to, really just kind of push away all of the mindfulness. Like it's almost like if you do have these like enlightenment factors of like I'm gonna have all this like joy and energy and tranquility, it could suddenly scare you into being like, oh, but then that's going to put me in a very vulnerable position as well. So you really is this tension between that the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system is just constantly kind of like at war with each other. Remembering to turn it into an opportunity to practice. I think I am really grateful that my teachers were adamant about following the Mahapajapati Sutta, and so having the foundations of mindfulness in body, feeling, mind, and just Dhamma, all of like Buddhist theory and things like that. My teacher emphasized the elements practice. And so that was kind of something that was always in my like for emergency first aid for remember we need to practice. Use this as an opportunity. Um, and so like always just trying to remind myself, right, like here's this, like I might slip off this rock right now, but if I can just focus on the hardness of it, if I can also focus that I too have that same quality in me, that there really isn't something that I am having to battle right now. Like my my life is not something that I need to use as a way to separate myself from the nature of like this rock versus the nature of who I am. and and then and also reminding myself that it's like, okay, and this is going to get kind of, I guess, morbid, but that it's also this death practice as well. Um, it's something that one of my teachers said was also that, like, in passing while we were hiking, she was like, we meditate so we know what to do when we die. And that was kind of early on. And I was like, I didn't realize that. Like, I didn't realize we were getting this serious. Like, we're having death pacts now with with meditation. Um, so that's also it might seem extreme, but I think it's also an extreme moment when we are, whether like that's actually the case or not, but our mind is creating this sense of like this is an extreme moment. And so um, I try to balance it out with being like, okay, but like it's like every moment is actually like this extreme moment of uncertainty where we have no idea what's going to happen. And so really leaning into that as well. And I think also remembering like that every kind of problem or uh, addiction or neurotic thing that we have, it's like it's always going to be with us. Like that same anger that I have in a traffic jam on the freeway is the same one in all of this like open, spacious nature where there, isn't any of that going on. And so just like really trying to um, also be open and curious about those moments where it's like, oh my God, I've been mindful for 3 months. Like, it's like, I thought I was mindful because I was so focused on doing all these tasks of just living. But then it's like, oh, okay, wait, that's still this other um, way to kind of block out that feeling of vulnerability that I feel like Buddhism is really trying to get us to this point of really just like accepting how vulnerable we are.
Certainly. And thank you for going into that. And especially just like where you just ended with that, just the sense of getting accepting that vulnerability because often we project so much, we think that we have control over so much, and you're right. Like I feel like there is this experience when you're out in the wilderness, even if you're just hiking, there is this sense of heightened awareness of potential danger, potential hazards, whatever it is. It could be storms, it could be animals, it could be rolling your ankle on something. There's various things that you like. It's uneven surfaces, and there is an awareness to that. But but just similarly, city living also has its challenges, has its dangers, has its
Mm,
realities that are out of your control and things like that. And so I appreciate that relationship that you have, where that awareness that you have as far as what your nervous system will do. It's like it's a very similar feeling that you have. It can be in
mm,
one environment, and it can show up in just in the same in the other one. And I also, I mean, I thought it was pretty amusing too when that person turned to you and said, we're doing this to practice, for our deaths, for so that we know what to do when we die. It's like, don't tell me that when we're on a retreat, because
yeah.
this is hard enough, and like we are coming back, right? We are like going to be.
Yeah.
This isn't it. This isn't the end. So but at the same time too, what it prepares you for is that moment to moment acceptance of we don't know what's around the corner at any point. So thank you for that. And yeah, no, it really is. It's really inspiring too, just because to get out and about and to do such an what seems to me historically just a very ancient practice of just going into caves, and it kind of reminds me of some ascetic practices that you read about, or some things that happen within like ascetic Hindu practices where you hear about yogis that to this day I'm sure continue to find themselves out in the wilderness doing practices like this. It's a wonderful thing that you found yourself connected to. And then while you were there having these life affirming, life changing experiences, I know that there was a more committed element that happened where you found yourself shaving your head and having a little bit more of at the end of a retreat or a culmination of the retreat or during a retreat, you found yourself really wanting to have a very active renunciatory experience. I was just wondering what compelled you to do that and how it's been since you did that.
Yeah, I have always been interested in ordaining, or at least I used to be. I'm not really sure how I feel about it now. But I kind of felt like that was the trajectory of my life. And then I also realized that I felt I guess troubled by the fact that there's still these institutionalized practices that are happening. And so I was wondering, like, is there a way to kind of do this in a way where it's not just like I'm going to go and like live in the national forest or something like that, or is there a way that it could be a bit more structured without it having the institution involved in it? And so I was very lucky that at the time my romantic partner um, was already sort of like practicing this I've heard it called like fringe renunciate kind of path, where he was like, okay, I'm done with this part of my life of living in the city and making money, and he had a very successful life. And then when he had the opportunity, he was like, okay, I'm just going to practice and live in caves and live off of donations and just live very simply and um, do only what's necessary and focus everything on practice and supporting other people in their practice as well. So I have to give him a lot of credit. Like he was definitely the person who supported me the most, because like he really pushed me to go for it. Like, he was really like, hey, like, you can do this, like, we'll support each other. We still support each other's practice very deeply, and we'll figure it out. And um, he's like, I did it, like, you can do it. I don't know the steps, but like, it'll work out in the way that it's supposed to work out for you. And so he really, he provided the space. He's like, hey, we can go and meditate in these caves. Here's a retreat center that we can go to if, we need to refuel or shower. And so he really supported me a lot, like, you know, with, gear, food, and making sure I was just getting my needs met so that I could keep pursuing this. But it all really started because my car got stolen. So that's actually who I want to give my credit to. Because my car got stolen in San Francisco, and that was like the last straw, I think, for me. I was like, you know what? I got to take a break from this game right now. Um, so
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No,
yeah.
and like that really does kind of like, well, I mean, if I really do have to reassess my attachment to possessions, there you go. There's like there's
Yeah.
there's your guidance towards a different lifestyle for sure. And so I wanted to talk about your Substack, and I'll do a quick naming of it real quick. It's Scoby, SCOBY, as in symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, which is like the
Yes.
kombucha, right? Yeah, wonderful. Big Scoby fan. Scoby.substack.com, and that's where you can read up on your Substack newsletters. And I was reading, I was looking through it, and I saw that just to go from where you are in the Yucca Valley and also in Arizona, you do travel extensively, in just different places in the West, American
Mhm.
West, but also too you've gone to Korea, and there was what seems like a very important moment for you, cooking in a monastery in Korea. And I just wanted to see if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about your experience being in Korea, being in a monastery and cooking, because I know that cooking for you has continued to be since a very important part of your expression
Mhm.
of Sangha and of practice in general. And I believe that there was an element to of decolonization in your mind that
Mhm.
came up from that. So I just want to know if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your experiences doing that.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for asking about that. Um, so in Korea, I got to stay at it was more of a Theravadan style monastery, actually. It was really interesting. It's this combination, again, it's a part of the Korean Son Chogye order in Korea. And so they practice more of like a Malaysian style Theravada Buddhism. And so I went there, and like there's some people from Malaysia, some people from Korea, some who are mixed. It was really cool to meet that Sangha and be a part of it. And I got to cook there. It was so funny because when I went there, I was kind of like, oh, I feel like I'm just doing my life, but just in a different place right now. And so it felt like this continuity and this expansion rather than just kind of like this thing that I'm going to go experience for the first time and have it just let it be contained in that. It really felt like this is like part of um, my bigger picture, I guess. Uh, and so the key thing I learned there, I think, was really like what it means to co-regulate and like why Sangha is here and what its function is. And I really feel like its function is like co-regulation, because it's like, okay, this is a space where we're all doing our inner work. We're all, trying to support each other on that. We're all trying to get closer to the truth. And it's a crazy world out there. And so just to continue building that sense of safety and intimacy and bonding, that was really what I learned at that monastery, because it is a really big one. I think, there's like at least 50 to 60 people there a day, depending on what's going on. And I had been in spaces where there was maybe like 10 at most. And then also realizing just how a lot of my reactivity, I think, just came from being um, in this kind of like weird half identity of like I grew up um, very Korean, however, in the US. And Korean was my first language, and I was pretty much only exposed to Korean people for the first few years of my life. So I didn't realize, like, really that I had been through this assimilation process once I started going into school and interacting with people outside of my family. And so at the Korean monastery, I felt like I was really able to process, like, oh, what is this sort of discomfort that I've always felt, um, particularly around other people? I was like, is it anxiety? Is it, um, you know, is there something within me, this very Buddhist thing of like, is there a defilement that's coming up? And, it's my problem. I need to deal with it. And of course, there's like, I think always like a little bit of both, but it really struck me where I was like, why do I feel like so in place in Korea, this monastery, but I felt so out of place in other, communities or monasteries, you know, or like I wouldn't say in nature, in caves and things like I haven't really felt that way, but it's definitely around like other people. I suddenly like the sense of like um not in sense like I feel like very like I'm like this kind of like on the margins, kind of like trying to fit in. But in Korea, I just felt like I didn't have to. There was just something that was already expressing itself. And this moment where I'm like cooking, we were making these little pancakes and all of the nuns there, because it was primarily a female monastery without it saying that, they were like, yeah, I've learned this recipe from this meditation master, from this one, and been passed down and all that. And we're just like cooking. And all of a sudden, I just felt this, um, what I would say, I guess, is a sense of equanimity that felt so like surreal. And I was so like, what is going on here? And I used to feel like it was some sort of like magic or something, like someone said like a mantra, and then all of a sudden, it was like we're all deactivated and stable and totally all knowing and all of that and safe and okay with dying, all that kind of stuff. But I was like, oh, it's like just like this feeling of safety, of people that I share like history with, that I share land with, that I share like, in some ways, like my heart and my blood, like we all have this familiarity. So that it really changed and made me realize how important that was, to really have that feeling if we're going to be on this path towards getting closer to truth.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it sounds like a very deeply powerful experience, and I'm so glad that you felt not more like more than seen. You just felt like you were like immediately integrated
Mm-hmm.
into your uh, culturally, but also just yourself, your personhood was very. It felt like it was
Mm-hmm.
very much like a part of that experience, and I'm so glad you had that experience. And I'm glad too, like there's this very interesting uh, perspective that you get from being in this kitchen too, where there's like a like-mindedness or shared interest just with this Buddhist path element too. But it's just amazing to hear that there are these teachers that are passing down their recipes, like literally their like sustenance, their nourishment, their kitchen-oriented recipes, and those being their own kind of teachings, those being their own kind of wisdoms that they're passing down. So it's wonderful that you got to touch that and got to be a part of it and bring it with you, because I know that now cooking is a very important part of your expression and work in the Yucca Valley. So thank you. And also too, I mean, I just wanted to point out, I mean, like it really is a very special perspective that you have, just like having been in the monastery working with food and like and applying that now to your practice. And I know that you're also, as far as like expression goes, expression of practice, expression of yourself. And you're also a wonderful poet. You really your command of language is really amazing, and I know that that's something that you've explored since you were maybe even before high school. But I was wondering, just like with your creative perspective, your creative expression with your path. I was wondering, like, because it seems like they've grown simultaneously or side by side, and I was wondering how being a poet and writing on retreat or writing in reflection, because I know your Instagram is full of really wonderful reflections with landscape, with practice, and I was just wondering like what that experience has been like expressing yourself through poetry in relation to your path.
Thank you so much for asking, for your kind words as well. It's been kind of a rough relationship. I remember when I was really starting to get serious about this, I also had this sort of like tension of like, oh, like making art is like reinforcing the self and and all the illusory nature of life, and I'm just going to make it worse. And so for a while, it was really hard to connect with creativity because at that time I sort of understood it as like, oh, that's like, that's a samsara machine. It's like this whole thing of creativity and, and becoming um, and all of that. And so I guess there was like a little bit of something I needed to work out there for a while. And then I finally worked it out. And that's the one great thing about Mahayana culture is like, oh yes, art is like this beautiful, amazing way to express Dharma. Um, and so and to investigate it as well. And so that's kind of where I've been lately with writing and just kind of drawing a lot of inspiration from a lot of the Zen and Sun poets and and also just finding so much inspiration too from the land and I feel like it's also this exercise in vulnerability and in like this way of kind of taking apart the self because it really now like when I'm making art and things like that, I'm getting more of this sense of like, oh yes, this is just like nature coming through right now. And the more I try to uh, refine it, or the more that I try to turn it into like what I think is my voice, I think that's when there are these blockages that come up. So really leading into like the selflessness of art and writing, which is so weird because sometimes I feel like art and well, particularly writing, especially if you're writing about like what you're doing, is very much like this self reinforcing um, act. But I kind of take that as like a moment of like, okay, yeah, it's just like meditation where sometimes I think I'm observing what's going on in the mind, but really I'm just thinking, like I'm just mind wandering right now. I'm just tricking myself into thinking that I'm observing, but I'm living it. So that's kind of how I try to tie it in with practice as well. Like if I'm writing, it's like, okay, if I start to judge myself about what I'm going to write, or if I'm about to be like, oh no, that wasn't good enough, or that's actually not this, or I just am now trying to just like let it happen on its own. So I guess yeah, it's still like a work in progress. I really try once a month to send out this newsletter on my Substack, um, and I try to have like a certain theme that I'm studying, and like a Dharma theme, whether it's a theory or a word or something that's just come up. Like I'm really trying to work on like the aspect of faith in Buddhism and trying to write about that a little bit. So that's kind of my process.
And thank you for doing it because that it does take a lot of comfort not well I don't know if it's comfortability but just the facing of your vulnerability to reflect on the moment and to deal with any kind of raw emotions and also the humility of trying to take a moment and trying to capture it in some way or try to reflect it in some way is a very difficult process. So I thank you for taking that challenge on, for having such a wonderful way of going about it. Because yeah, you're writing on your Substack, but also you're writing in your poetry outside of that is really wonderful, and it does help. I mean, like the Substack that you have, I mean, it really does offer these kind of short pieces that uh, provide a lot of insight, and I think it helps other people when they read it. And so I thank you for making this available for people to not just read but also to support, and also too. I mean, there's this kind of in between liminal kind of bridge that poetry does, where it kind of like it moves you, it kind of pulls you into something that is a, I don't want to say like deeper sense of reality, but like a different sense of reality. And I think that it kind of has a very beautiful pull or connection that you can kind of manifest through your words. So thank you for expressing yourself and for putting it out there, because it does inspire for sure. And I just wanted to ask one more question before I ask you two more questions. But the one question is, you've gone through this path of learning a lot, and I think you continue to learn a lot, and you're around various bhikkhunis and other figures that have helped guide you in various ways, and you've gone through different elements of your commitment to your path, and it seems like now you have a giving back role where you're leading meditations, or you're offering your insights through your Substack, and I think also too you have a hand in leading the queer Vihara retreat, which happens at Dharma Treasure. And I was wondering what it feels like for you to be in a role where you are facilitating and guiding now, and also to what it feels like to create a space that is for queer identifying people to come together and practice.
Thank you again so much for the kind words and for asking about this. Yeah, it's definitely been a trip, I would say, yeah, to then start organizing retreats. And it's particularly for queer community as well. I like it just all of a sudden happened. I would say, like, I kept thinking in my head, like, this is really something I want to do, and particularly because of that experience at the Korean monastery of it just changes everything, where you feel an inherent sense of belonging in a space, and so that was the intention for starting these queer retreats, particularly because like we I think in order to get to a point where we can gain some insight based off of what the Buddha is teaching, or his whole layout of the path that we're on, like it's some like pretty, it can get really heavy. Like I feel like it should be like super heavy. I mean, we're talking about um dukkha, this like suffering, this all these different imprints in our life that we are not always aware of, that's going on, and some of them that we can't share, because if we do, then yeah, there is a total risk to our well-being because of that, and a lot of harm can come up because of that. And so if we're in a space where I think we can have more faith than like, and I guess like a cishet um, normative setting, right? Like if we can already have some more faith that we can share these things, and also feel safe to receive feedback from other people within our sangha about the work that we're trying to do, feedback that's both positive, and some things that might be kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't see that, that's a blind spot, but we really have to trust each other in order to be able to point those things out. And so for me, it's like also like, because I would say selfish too, because organizing these retreats are so I learned so much from doing them. And it gives me even more of a drive to just keep exploring, and to not become complacent, or to only stay within one view or lineage of Buddhism, but to really try to like figure out all the things, and to also connect Buddhist practice and theories into everything. um, I always find it's kind of like, oh yeah, if we meditate, it's like it's not just sitting down and focusing on an object or being aware of all the different objects. It's like it's always happening all the time. So I think the more that we can um, connect communities together in that way, it really shows how like Dhamma is like a part of everything. It's not just like this sort of Buddhist view on it. It's just talking about like, that there is suffering, that there's these different ways out of suffering. And I think we always learn more when there's more people involved, for sure. And so I'm very grateful that my friend Monty, who is just like an amazing nervous system therapist, that they were, kind of like jumped with me when I was like, hey, let's do this queer Vihara meditation retreat. And they've done tons of retreats within their field of work, with nervous system uh, theory and therapy. And so, but they're like, I haven't done like that. We haven't organized meditation one. So it's just so fun, like doing it together, because we're like, okay, I think it's supposed to go like this, and we need to have these things right. And then it ended up just being like this super beautiful gathering where like we didn't have to like have like these sort of like typical structures that we may see in other meditation retreats or in different organizations. And so we really try to um, make it, I mean, we do have some structure involved, but we really try to make it so that everyone can have an experience that works best for them.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, I mean, there's these very fundamentally important things that you're doing by creating spaces like the Queer Vihara retreat, and making sure that people can, yeah, like express themselves, receive feedback, offer questions, and bring in their lives, bring in the fullness of their lives and the richness of their lives to those retreats, having this a learning experience for you, where you can be in company with people that are from different Buddhist lineages, different paths that have brought them there, different wisdoms and insights that they have from their own lives into this space. But there's something also just really exciting about what it seems like. I've never organized my own retreat, but it seems like there's something really exciting about having a hand in structuring something that has elements that are structureless, that allow for some spontaneity, allow for some difference and some things to come up, but also too at the same time, getting to be like, well, you know what, I these are the elements of retreat that are really rich for me, and so I want to make sure that these are in place. And then you have someone that has a lot of work with nervous system um, therapy or just approach, and you have that kind of feeding and also kind of guiding how the retreat functions. It just sounds like a really awesome time. So I'm just glad that you have this like really rich experience for yourself where you're learning from other people, but also too that there's this newness and excitement that's around it too. It just sounds really, really wonderful. Well, and this might tie into just my two other questions. One which has to do with promotion, and then one that has to do with advice. And just while we're on the topic here, so you have what seems like a upcoming queer Vihara retreat scheduled for April 1st, 2026 through the 5th at Dharma Treasure, which is in Cochise Stronghold. Okay, cool. Sorry, that's a word that's new to me in Arizona. And more information about that retreat and also Dharma Treasure, which we talked about earlier, you can be found at dharmatreasure.org. And then you also have your Substack, scoby.substack.com. That's Scoby, Scoby. And then also too, we talked about Mahapajapati Monastery, which you can find more information at mahapajapatiinfo.wordpress.com. And there have been some invitations on the website to join in weekly community group Vipassana sittings, meditations that happen both in person and on Zoom. And so the more information can be found at that website that I just mentioned. But if there's anything else that you'd like to promote or shine a light on, whether it's something that you've been working on or someone that is putting together, please feel free to share.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would say, the person who really pushed me into this kind of like renunciation, like Buddhism full time, live out in nature. Henrik Norberg, he hosts a lot of these kinds of nature based retreats where you're doing these long hikes and really working with the elements. So he calls it the Nomad Retreat. And you can also find all of the information for his retreats, which occur in Arizona and Norway and Thailand. And he also has some classes that he does. He's a teacher in the Mind Illuminated lineage. And so you can find all of that information at dharmatreasure.org.
Wonderful. Wow. That's a very distinct places to have retreats too. So that's a really
Yes.
really you can kind of really choose which environment you want to be in, and with that, that's wonderful. Thank you for offering that. And then my second question has to do with advice, and I just wanted to see if you um, had any advice for somebody that is beginning their Buddhist journey. So, like, what would be something that you would want to say to yourself or someone like yourself as you were beginning your own journey through Buddhism?
Just sit with that for a little bit. Say to do a little bit of research in all the different lineages and try to get as niche as possible and and find someone one of the find someone who can be a role model, even if it's someone like Ryokan, who is from thousands of years ago, um, or for me it was Daehaeng Sunim, and really just learn about who they are. I think it's so important to find a Dharma role model, because it makes us also feel a little less unique if we can learn about other people's experience and that we can relate to. And then that uh, as the uniqueness decreases, I think we may find some more support and realize that it is okay to be vulnerable, and also to not be afraid of what people are going to think. And to go back to the support part, that like we all have so much more support than we may believe. Um, and and if it seems super crazy, and just pursue it, as long as you're not harming yourself and you're not harming anyone else and you're getting all of your basic needs met, like just go for the crazy thing. And I would say, yeah, spend some time by yourself. Like go and do like a trip by yourself, go travel by yourself or something like that. um all while like finding different role models in Buddhism. Yes. I feel like that kind of fell apart at the end.
No, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. I especially, I mean, like that guidance to really read up on a role model or to explore somebody who you respect or has like a path that you respect to see like that it wasn't always easy for them, or that it wasn't always perfectly set out for them because you get to role models typically are someone that are a little bit older than yourself, and so they've it looks like their whole life has been more or less set from the beginning, but they were exploring their lives and all the uncontrollable things that come in and out, just like how we are. And so to see somebody else who was at one point unsure, which is who now looks quite sure, or at least looks a little more comfortable. That certainly inspires me, and that certainly gives me some hope. And also too, I mean, yeah, it's just as long as you're safe and you're doing it with your senses open and you're you're in a way that you feel safe enough to be on your own traveling or otherwise going into that crazy thing. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to invite somebody to jump in fully, as long as they feel good and so no one else is getting hurt. Just make sure that you are saying yes to something that you feel like will jolt you into something new and something that will maybe impact your life for the better. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your advice and your very rich story. So thank you for your openness to talking with me and for sharing, and also for all the work that you're doing, creating spaces like the Queer Vihara retreat, and also too just sharing your words, both just in with your storytelling, but also with your Substack, and also too with your poetry and your creative work. So thank you for being so open and for sharing.
Thank you so much, Vincent. It was truly a pleasure to connect with you, and I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation.